Hi, everyone. This is Maheen, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we are talking about the financial operating system, the backbone that every growing business needs to stop struggling with complexity and start really focusing on the growth. In 2026, managing a business shouldn't mean drowning in administrative tasks. It means a lot more. And we will be discussing that today by having us joined by Faye Pang, the Chief Growth Officer at FreshBooks. With a high impact background scaling brands from Uber Eats to Zero, Faye is now helping thousands of small business owners simplify their financial lives. So, without a further ado, let's dive in and welcome Faye. Faye, we're very pleased to have you join us this Friday afternoon. How are you?
Thanks, Maheen. No, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Very excited to delve into today's topic, Faye. And we'd love to kind of open our discussion by understanding the state of the SMB. Faye, you have such a unique vantage point on the Canadian small business landscape, having worked in both tech and consumer markets. Tell us, what sentiment shift are Canadian small business owners experiencing in today's economy?
Yeah, one of the biggest shifts we're seeing from our vantage point here at FreshBooks is the challenge has really gone from finding workers to finding customers, right? A year or two ago, the small business owners we spoke to were really struggling to hire and retain talent, and that has really felt like it's eased. What's ultimately replaced it is more of a demand problem, and it's showing up across the service-based small businesses that we really focus on here at FreshBooks, as well as a broader small business community. If you look at data, say from CFIB, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. So I'll share a couple stats with you, Maheen. We ran a study in 2025, State of Small Business Report, and 47% of the small business owners came back and told us that customer acquisition was harder than previous years. And again, with CFIB, we know they're seeing a very similar thing, right? More than half of their businesses are reporting weak demand as their top constraint. So I think what's really interesting to note about that is the gap is seems to be hitting Canadian owners harder than US based ones, as we have customers on both sides of the border. There's a real difference in the confidence gap. And I think a lot of it can probably be chalked up to trade uncertainty and what things like tariffs have done to relationships. But we're also seeing that in our data, where only 23% of the Ontario-based small business owners told us that they feel optimistic about the economy, whereas that number is closer to 38% in the US. So an interesting dichotomy between the two countries, and certainly indicative of the broader macroeconomic context.
Really understanding the macro environment is a crucial first step to proactive planning rather than just the reactive survival. So thank you for opening up on such a great note, Faye. Now
Yeah.
let's explore how a strong financial operating system helps entrepreneurs simplify complexity and really plan proactively. Faye, why is an integrated financial operating system essential for growing businesses?
Yeah, I think it is super important, right? If you think about most small business owners, they start with actually revenue in a personal bank account. They might be keeping their receipts in a shoebox or a little wire basket, and honestly, that probably works for a while. But as your business grows, you ultimately end up with a patchwork of disconnected tools, and the owner becomes the CFO of the company, but also the bottleneck layer between all of that, and ends up being hours that you're spending each week on admin and not on growing your client base or thinking about the future of your business. I think that would probably resonate with a lot of the listeners on this podcast today. And it bears out in the data that we see, right? That same small business report I mentioned earlier, 57% of the owners that we surveyed told us time management got harder this year than in years past. And we know some of the owners that use our platform are saving an average of 16 hours a month on admin. So when your tools talk to each other, you get a lot more efficiency and time back. But when they don't, you lose visibility. You end up being that translation layer, and you have a harder and harder time figuring out what is my true financial position, this month, this week, today, because you don't have that single view of what's happening. And so our philosophy is at FreshBooks has always been, let's try to bring those things together: invoicing, payments, expenses, time tracking, all into one central place. So our business owners can get a real picture of their cash flow without having to stitch it together themselves. And, that's surfaced in really intuitive reports and dashboards that allow them to understand their financial position. I think ultimately that is the promise of an integrated operating system, is being able to give you that holistic view without having to do a whole bunch of translation work yourself.
No, it tells us a lot and helps us understand that streamlining our finance stack is quite the only way to reclaim the hours that we need to actually grow the business. Next up, Faye, let's discuss how improving access to capital helps founders maintain liquidity and momentum. How do integrated payments and capital tools improve SME survival and cash flow?
Yeah, I think we've all heard the old adage, "Cash is king or queen," and like it's a cliche, but it's true, right? Honestly, stressing about cash flow is a thing that we hear all the time here from our small business owners. It's what keeps them up at night, and it's not a theoretical thing. It's very real, right? If you can't collect an invoice or you have a customer that's overdue, you might not be able to make payroll. You could be, jeopardized in meeting your rent obligations or your suppliers. It's that gap between you doing the work and then you getting paid for doing that work can sometimes be weeks or months, and that gap is exactly where businesses businesses fail. I mentioned some of the CFIB data earlier, but that bears it out, right? 18% of businesses had a poor year, contemplated closing permanently due to tariffs, and that's from their February 26 data. We see in our own data, like 30% of businesses we surveyed last year saw supply costs increase. It was even higher for those that were reliant on imports. So being able to manage your cash in the face of some of those challenges is super important. And one of the things that we found has been really helpful is when you build payments directly into your invoicing. You really remove some of that friction for your client and speed up that entire life cycle of sending an estimate or a proposal, getting the client to buy off on that, doing the work and then getting paid for it. And ultimately, that speed is super, super important. It helps you maintain a steady cash flow and avoid some of the stress that comes from not knowing. Our Stripe integration and our partnership with Stripe was a really big step here and a huge benefit for our customers. Wasn't just like an improvement in payments, but it meant that our customers could actually do things like accept cards, bank transfers, other payment methods directly from their invoices, and everything reconciles automatically. So you're not having to switch between platforms. It's a much better experience for your customer. And ultimately, the money comes in and your books reflect it in near real time.
Well, it tells us that democratizing access to financial tools is quite the game changer for businesses that are looking to scale. And to all the founders that are watching, we really need to, at this point, stop trying to do everything manually. Like if we are still
Mhm.
handling invoicing, payroll, and payments in three different places and three different systems that don't even talk to each other, we aren't just wasting time, we're losing that money. So thank you for helping us understand that, Faye.
Couldn't
Now
agree
let's
with
look
you
at
more.
how strategic partnerships strengthen the broader Canadian business ecosystem. Tell us, how do the ecosystem partnership help small businesses operate more efficiently?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and really the small business owners that I talk to, they didn't get into business to become an expert in software integration, right? In fact, they get quite um, overwhelmed by all the choice out there, and ultimately, what I hear is we just want things to work. We want them to work together, and we want to not have to think about it or stress about it. When your accounting talks to your payroll, when your payments reconcile automatically, when your project management syncs directly with your expenses. That's the promise of technology. And you just mentioned it earlier, Maheen. It's, that is the promised land, right? And so as it relates to partnerships, for us here at FreshBooks, those are super important. They allow us to extend what our platform can do without asking the owner to take on that additional mental weight and toll of evaluation and doing that work manually. So one really great example, and I think you just had them on this podcast recently, is a Canadian company called WagePoint. Right? They do payroll for small businesses, and we've just recently partnered with them to really offer that seamless, integrated experience for our customers. Stripe for payments is another one. Our FreshBooks payments product is powered by Stripe, and that allows you to, again, just offer really seamless, best in class payments experience for your customer. Ultimately, we're very excited and proud about the partnerships that we built in our ecosystem because they allow us to extend the FreshBooks platform and to help our customers with more of those jobs to be done that they have, again, in a really integrated way. There are very few small business owners that started their business because they're excited about the admin, the bookkeeping, the payroll elements of it. Those are just costs of doing business. But our partners allow us to make that a bit simpler, a more delightful experience, and ultimately as seamless as possible.
That is super insightful, Faye. And it tells us that a well connected tech stack is the ultimate force multiplier for a busy entrepreneur in today's market. And I know that a lot of our listeners will be able to relate and find this super useful. Finally, let's explore how past scaling experience shapes the path from startup to large scale operations. Faye, what separates businesses that plateau from those that successfully scale?
Yeah, I've been in the getting small businesses in Canada to adopt technology game for the better part of the last decade in various industries, whether it was food delivery or logistics, and now, financial management and operating systems. And there's some trends that have carried through each of those experiences. And so maybe the first one is just to say that from what I've seen, businesses rarely plateau for lack of ambition or will. And it's usually that they're spending way too much time just trying to tread water, keep the lights on, right? Chase those payments, manually reconcile their books, toggle between five different tools, and ultimately serve as CEO, CFO, head of finance, and bookkeeper. So really thinking about valuing your time and how you might leverage the latest technology to level up what you're working on, I think is one of those key barriers. There are blind spots around not really knowing your real numbers. A lot of owners, shockingly, they can tell you how much revenue came in last month, but they couldn't necessarily tell you who their most profitable customer was or what their actual profit margin looks like. When you don't have that real-time visibility into your finances, you might not have all the information you need to confidently make decisions on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. I'll share a data point with you in our state of small, our tax trend report from 2025. Only 26% of the businesses that we surveyed felt confident about their tax submission. So think about that. Like just over a quarter felt confident. That means three-quarters of small business owners hit send and sort of expected something to be wrong, right? It's not a good place to be. So knowing your numbers and having the system set up so that you could have real-time visibility and insight into that, I think is one key barrier. The second is just accepting that admin is an inevitable part of the job. One of the things that makes small business owners and entrepreneurs so successful is they are not hesitant to roll up their sleeves and dive in and do the tough work. That is also what sometimes holds them back, right? At some point, the manual work you're doing day in and day out is going to keep you from scaling. And so rather than put in systems and tools when you need it, think about how you can build those now to allow you to scale, to give you that time back and to give you that mental space and capacity to go build the future of your business. And that really leads to the last point I want to make in this question, which is I often see small business owners just waiting too long to systematize, right? Like integrated software, we talked about automated invoicing, recurring templates for those customers that you have that are very consistent every month. It just buys you back minutes, and then those minutes become hours, and that time is spent on other things, in addition to leveraging the latest technology to ensure that you're getting paid as fast as possible and you're managing your cash flow. So those are the few things I would say are really plateau drivers of what I've seen from a small businesses in Canada perspective.
There is no doubt that relentless focus on customer experience is a defining trait that separates sustainable success from the stagnation. But this was an overall amazing conversation, as usual, with you, Faye. Thank you so much for walking us through and taking us with so much in such a short amount of time. As we wrap up, what is that one piece of advice that you'd give to founders that are stuck at the same revenue level?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about some of the macroeconomic uncertainty that's circling, and maybe a business owner is listening to this podcast feeling a little bit stuck. I think the parting words I would leave with is, the natural instinct is to probably turtle up, cut costs, maybe push off that technology investment or that capital expenditure, given all of that. But I really challenge folks to think about the additional efficiency and uplift that you might see from putting those systems into place, or taking what is 5 or 6 different tools today and thinking about how you might bring that together into one cohesive financial operating system, right? And so think about that, audit the tools that you're using today. How many of them are integrated? Which of those don't talk to one another? How much time are you wasting just translating in a given month? And if you're paying for separate tools for invoicing and payment processing, expenses, et cetera, think about how you might actually bring that all together. Um, I'll also maybe add a bonus one, which is really using the opportunity to prioritize cash flow and visibility, right? The confidence that you need to make decisions about, where you spend your time and where you allocate your resources. So much of that comes from the right cash flow insights, and the right integrated system that allows you to stay on top of on all of that.
That is a great reminder, Faye, that simplicity and strategic focus are the best tools that we can have to overcome any growth plateau. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing such great expertise and your insights. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And listeners, that was Faye Pang from FreshBooks, a masterclass on how to build a financial foundation that supports your growth instead of hindering it. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more resources. A special shout out before we leave to our partners, UPS and ADP, for their ongoing commitment to empowering small businesses across Canada. Please keep thriving, and we'll see you in the next one.